And I'm going to start with Darwin's own evidence. But before I talk about that, let's talk about what it means for parsimony. So you were saying what parsimony is? What is that?
Parsimony is when a theory has to be simple and it's easy to understand.
Right. And explain everything there is to explain in the least amount of steps as possible. Right? So the thing about evolution compared to other explanations for the diversity and unity of life, because this is the cool thing, I finished last class with this. And I said, the awesome thing about evolution is it explains all the diversity that exists in life, as well as the unity of life. Why life is so varied, and why life is in some ways so similar. Right? So in a lot of ways, all life forms have similarities in common, and that's because we evolved from common ancestors. And in a lot of ways, life is different, and that's because life adapted to different environments and through different processes, which we'll learn more about in microevolution. It's a very interesting lecture. You're not sure the whole genetics stuff. Don't worry about that too much. But the rest of it, all the mechanisms of microevolution, the 5 mechanisms of microevolution, all that cool stuff about sexual dimorphism and sexual selection, the stuff about mimicry, it's really interesting. So watch the videos, they're really good. Now, parsimony. Evolution is the most simplest explanation for everything. So I'm going to put in the board a list of these evidence for evolution that we're talking about. So the first one is simplicity. Right? Evolution is the most simplest explanation that explains everything. Another thing that evolution explains really well, it's related to the rest of bio. So another thing that makes evolution very good is the fact that it makes sense with everything else. As you see, it ties with population ecology and with the rest of ecology. It explains the unity of life. It explains the diversity of life. All right? And so evolution makes sense. Now, let's talk about evidence that Darwin presented. One of the few things that, when Darwin published his book, one of the things that he said, this is what I based my theory on. What did he have to tell the scientists? What proof did he have to show? What did Darwin use? You guys know? We talked about it last class. So let's see. Celeste, give me something. Let's try again. What did Darwin say? He just came up with this? Or did he have something to show, this is what I'm basing my ideas on? He used fossils. Yes. What else did Darwin have on his book? Yes? Notes. He had notes from his travels. And in all those notes, there was a lot of good logic. That just made sense. What else did he have? He was an accomplished artist. What else did he have? Yes?
He had pictures of
Pictures, not pictures. Drawings. All right? Drawings. And in these drawings, he showed the great diversity of life that existed and the similarities and differences that existed between them. All right, so that's Darwin. Let's talk about something else. All right? He was a naturalist, took a trip around the world, right? Okay, fossil evidence, journals, drawings. Look, this is one of his, of the salamanders that he saw. Look at the beaks of the finches that he saw on different islands. Each finch matched to its environment. So, by the way, there's a big museum. Look, this is actual specimens that he drew, collected from the places for his journey. But every port that he would stop in the middle of his journey, he would pack things in boxes and ship it back to home. So throughout 6 years of travels, right, he collected like a house full of stuff. Nowadays, if you go to Great Britain, you can actually go to a museum of Darwin's journey. And there's a picture of something to represent the beagle in there as well. All right, that's where the Galapagos is. Now, this is what's so cool about it. They were very close. Close enough that life forms could accidentally make jumps from one island to the other. But in each island, there are differences in climate, in geography, that made them be different. So let's talk about that as a piece of evidence for evolution. It's called biogeography. All right? Anybody knows what biogeography is all about? Let's see Sophia. Where's Sophia Diaz? What's the deal with this biogeography business?
It's about the land, I think.
Well, geography is about land, but what does it have to do?
Like the living things on the land.
Okay. Nice guess, because you're translating the word bio and geography. All right? But I'm saying, like, why do finches, according to Darwin, why do the finches have different beaks?
They adapt to their environment.
Okay. So this finch is from Cocos Island, right? That finch is from that's a large cactus finch from a different island. It eats cactus. This one eats insects. That's because that island has only insects. That one has things, cactus seeds and stuff to eat. So he has a beak that's more for seed cracking. What's this whole biogeography thing about? That life is what? No. No. Yes, not as its life forms seem to be what? Matched to their environments. That's what I was looking for. Right? So it's the study of biographical patterns of diversity. All right? Write that down, right? So biogeography, now natural selection explains that. Why there's these patterns of diversity. Okay, let's keep going. See that? In one island, their necks are short, the other islands are necks are medium, the other islands necks are long, and it has to do with the vegetation. Each one of them has to eat.
Isn't there like one to the left or one of the islands?
Yeah. And these are different salamanders and alligators. Not salamanders, sorry. What are you talking about? Iguanas. Different types of iguanas and lizards, each match for the ecosystem they live in. Let's see how the plants have their color, and it's kind of matched to kind of blend with it, right? So that's kind of how they are like. Okay, look, Darwin's drawing of a tree. I remember I actually finished last class with this thought. Understanding that adaptive radiation, which is this concept that from one finch, all the finches came by splitting to families because they went to islands that had different things. Are you with me? That's easy to see, easy to accept. All of the diversity of humans coming from one original type of human because of successive mutation and selection events. But Darwin took that further and he said, well, if the finches may have come from others, which may come from other birds, which may come from other things, which may come from other things, which may come from other things, and ultimately everything is on some sort of root. So the idea of descent with modification implies common ancestry. And that's where people started getting problems with Darwin's theories. His first book, On the Origin of Species by the Means of Natural Selection, or the Survivalists of Favored Races, or something like that. I forget how it is, but it's a long title. It's right there. Or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Right? Was not actually what caused the dilemma. The second book that he published was called The Descent of Men. And if I have time during the year at some point, I'll read a paragraph or two from that book to you. And then you're going to see that some of the things he said there were kind of, it rubbed it wrong. It rubbed people wrong, and that's why it was like that. I have a really beautiful copy of that book. I'll bring it to class sometime, and you guys are interested, you can read it. See, look what he's talking about. See, there's different types of life, there's different races of humans. So Darwin's is making the argument that all this variety that exists is just an example. The Descent of Man, he was trying to, one of the chapters of Descent of Man, he's trying to argue whether or not humans are different species. Right? You know, if the black and white are different species or not. But then he ultimately decides that it's not, because they still interbreed, right? So they cannot be a different species. This is just a review of the background that we have for. Let me skip all of this thing because I already talked about it last class and go directly to the evidence for evolution. All right. There's a lot here. This is actually kind of cool. Let me show you this. This is on the videos I started talking about selection. This is the pepper moth example I talked about in the videos, and that's what we did in class, right? So we talked about that. You were supposed to, by the way, describe the historical example of the pepper moth in the thing. You know, make sure the industrial revolution causes more pollution. This is something else that's evidence for natural selection. Oh, let's talk about that kind of evidence, right? Actual field biology examples, right? Actual field biology examples. And by that I mean we've seen it. We've seen evolution happen, like legit seen it. Microbiology. We'll talk about that in one example. We've seen it with virology, the evolution of viruses. We've seen it with simple zoology. We've seen worms evolve into different species in the lab, and also seen flies evolve into different species in the lab. We saw new species of virus. Every year there's a new flu virus. That's evolution. Bacteria, in the 1930s, you went to the hospital, and penicillin was a panacea. You got an infection, no problem, penicillin will kill it. Nowadays, you go to the hospital, penicillin only works half the time because the bacteria have adapted to it, right? Viruses. The same medications that used to work on HIV viruses 10 years ago don't work today because the virus keeps adapting to it, all right? So, this actual example of field biology is example. We talked about biogeography already, all right? Fossil record. Fossils. Fossils show the progression of a species throughout time. The elephant is part of a large history that of a lot of extinct animals. They're not allowed anymore. The fossil record shows the progression of that, of the elephant through time. Species that no longer exist of things that were the elephant-like. You know? By the way, there's 3 current species of elephant living in the world. But the rest of them are horses. The geological record is full of evidence. Almost every single life form out there, we don't have all the steps because the fossil record is not perfect, right? Usually things that live in forests, things that live in ocean, things that live in marshes, they're preserved more because it's areas which are more likely to be exposed to rainfall, landslides that will bury organisms. And in the ocean, that happens naturally because they fall to the bottom and get buried by sediments. Are you with me? Meanwhile, the deserts where there's less water, it's less likely to be preserved. Organisms with hard shells are already hard, or with bones, are more likely to be preserved than things which are more soft. So the fossil record is not perfect because of that. Here's another example of field biology. You set 2 iguanas, 2 types of lizards, separated by a mountain chain, each side of them, 2 different species. All right? Because of that. Yes? I can't do it right now. I'm teaching. Come back some other time. Sorry. All right? So, there's a great diversity in life, right? What explains that? Let's talk about more evidence. Okay, we'll go in a second. Hold on. Fossils, we already talked about it, right? Here's something that's very interesting. If you go to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., one time in your life, it's worth going there, but you don't have to go that far. Over here in Miami, there's a museum in Vizcaya. There's another one in Broward, the Science Museum there. And they have these things there so you can look at, or at least replicas of them. Now, when you sit there and you look at a cranium of something that's not human, it's not human. It's not a human cranium. There's a human cranium and another cranium, and a gorilla cranium. You can look at all 3 of them next to each other, and you can see this is not a monkey, right? It's not an ape, but it's a cousin of the ape. And then you have our cranium, and then the cranium of this other hominoid. It's clearly not a human cranium. But it's not like one mutant person. It's completely different. Like the structures are very different. And yet, it's not human. But it's not either an ape. What is it? And why is it never in the same layer? Why is it more ancient than ours? Because they're not human. They are our ancestors, right? There are other things that used to exist from which we came from. How do you explain that if you don't have evolution, right? How do you explain this other types of hominid specimens, all right? And it's, but they've never been found intact or complete. That's a myth. They have found complete, almost nearly complete skeletons of some of these things, all right? And so fossils, it's really hard to argue the fossil record, all right? Here's another thing that happens for evolution, anatomy, right? So these are the ones we already talked about. That is an organism with a hind leg, but he's on the water because he is a mammal that evolved from land mammals. You know, what's happening? He's losing over time, not because he's not using it, but because it's disadvantageous to make something that you're not going to use, so he wastes the energy with it. That's what kind of structure is that? Vestigial. All right? We learned about that already. We talked about it in the quiz. A structure that you're losing because it's having an energy cost. All right? This is showing us homology. Look at this. Different organisms, right? This is an aquatic, terrestrial mammal, an aquatic mammal, right? A fully aquatic mammal, right? Predominantly aquatic, fully aquatic, right? And then even a whale. But notice that the pelvic bone is still there in all of them. Even on the whale. It's a vestigial structure, but it's there. Look at the rib cage structure. And they're similar. Why are they similar? Because they share common ancestor. Why are all phones similar? And they share function too. We'll talk about that in a second. All right? Now here it is. You see the bones of humans, the bones of cats, the bones of whales, the bones of bats. The number of bones, the structure of the connections between the bones, the articulations. A lot of it is similar. Now, each of them modified because they have different pressure. Are you with me? But yet, there's a degree of similarity because they share common ancestral. Likewise, the proteins that carry oxygen in the blood of different organisms look very similar to each other. So this could also exist at the molecular level. These same things that exist at the organism level exist at the molecular level. We have genes which are useless. We'll call them pseudogenes. We have genes inside of us which are the same genes as bacteria genes, except broken, unusable, just there. Almost like in a library, a book that's missing all the pages except for one. But if you get that page and compare it to the pages of the books in the library of bacteria, it's the same page. So we have bacterial genes inside of us. Why? Because us and bacteria came from the same thing. That's why there's a gene of it inside of us. Are you with me? That's actually very interesting if you stop to think about it. It's a library, our DNA is, and it has some remnants, vestigial structures of our ancestors in it. We have in DNA genes which are very similar to the genes of our ancestors. So we call those homologies too, homoplasties. All right? So similarities in the genes, all right, between us and our ancestors. So that's what they're showing you over there. Look at there. That's what it's talking about. 94.5% of the sequence of amino acids. These are the building blocks of proteins. You must have heard about proteins in your life. Amino acids are the building blocks. We're going to learn more about that soon. The building blocks of proteins are called amino acids. Humans and monkeys on the protein that carries the oxygen in the blood, hemoglobin. 95% of protein is identical. Not 100%, right? If you compare your protein with that of another human, it will be almost 100% the same. All right? Are you with me? But you compare your oxygen-carrying protein with that of a rhesus monkey, it will be 95% the same. Then you compare with the mouse, it's 87% the same. You compare with the chicken, it's 69% the same. You compare with the frog, it's 54%. What is that showing you? The further they are from us in the evolutionary history, the less similar they are to us. Does that make sense? Of course it makes sense. But what it doesn't make sense is explaining any other way. Why is it so different from the lamprey? Because it's been millions of years since we split from them. Are you with me? It's like it's a fish, right? Well, not really a fish, but it's an interesting family of fish. It's an aquatic animal. But do you see what I'm saying? This is what we call, there's a certain degree of homology. But why is it only 87? Why is it not exactly the same? Because since we split from them, they've done some changes that we haven't done. Are you with me? The same way that if you look at bone structures, since we had the same ancestor, they have gone to a different pressure. So selection has changed them in a different direction. Let me give you an example. Phones started from one thing, communication with somebody else. But each company has taken them into a different direction, right? And that's because the pressures for each company are different. And so that's why the phones all look the same. Now, that's a bad example because phones are designed. And nothing is really designing this. It's just the environment putting pressure, right? But in a way, designers only respond to market pressure, right? So in a way, it's kind of a good example of what I'm trying to say. All right, so this is an example of homology. Look, what is that then? An example of. We talked about this in the quiz. They're all wings, but the wings are not really the same. They're different, but they're same. But now, why is there similar then? Yes.
But they're not respected because they don't have a common ancestry.
But they have a common what? Hold on. You can get Legos. Mariana. So if they don't have a common ancestor, where's Mariana? Right? If you don't have a common ancestor, why are they so similar? Because all of them are trying to do what? Which is what? Fly. So in evolution, let's talk about this. This is what's this called? Analogous. Now, how do you tell these two apart? Homology and analogy. This is very important, okay? It's going to be on the test for sure. Analogous structures is when you have different ancestor but same pressure. Alright? And homologous structures is when you have the same ancestor but different pressure. Now, these will be very, very similar. These will be somewhat similar. These are doing the same thing. These are doing different things with the same basic design. Are you with me? I'm saying these are the same structure doing different things. This is different structures to do the same thing. This explains why we all have shared ancestry. This explains what happens when we get the same pressure. Does that make sense? Both can be seen as evidence for evolution. Here's another one that's interesting. Oh, by the way, these are a bunch of vestigial structures. All right? So there's the ones I feel I talked about in the quiz. We have our wisdom teeth, right? That we don't really use it anymore. The appendix, the nictitating membrane. We have this membrane that horses actually have a whole one. That means they don't have to blink as often because they have protection for their eyes are protected by a membrane. Birds, when they fly, they have one too. Fishes have that too. We don't have it. We lost it. Almost all of it, we lost it. All right? We actually have a tailbone. Right? Why do we have a tailbone? Because we came from things. See, that's the kind. Okay, all of these evidences, I have my favorites, and this one right here is one of my favorites. Because I'll tell you something that doesn't make sense to me. Why is a designer putting a tail on me? That doesn't make sense. Are you with me? It's there because we're losing it over the periods of time because we no longer use it. But not because we don't use it, but because the cost of building it makes us less likely to survive. Are you with me? So anybody that doesn't build it saves that energy. It makes it. See, in the act of making that bone, something could go wrong. You could die in the embryo. Somebody that doesn't bother making it, or makes it a smaller one, has less chance of doing that. Over long periods of time, that's going to disappear. Are you with me? Not because it's useless, but because it's disadvantageous to build something useless. Are you with me? You have to tie it back to advantages and disadvantages. Everybody clear with that? Okay. All right. Yes?
What's the tail do for?
Lots of things. People, they use it to swat out flies. They used to, but some use it for equilibrium. What monkeys use it for sometimes?
Swinging.
So swinging and climbing, stability. It's used for aggressive displays. It's used for communication. Dogs use it for communication all the time between them. There's all kinds of things. Which is another evidence for evolution. Which is about the thing I'm about to talk about. Mosaic structures. That was a great point. We have, go ahead. We have a tail, the same structure being used for many different purposes. Our hand is an example of that. That's a structure that evolved for what? Really? To walk. These things were walking tools. But long ago, our ancestors started using them for what? For grabbing and climbing. And opposable thumbs evolved to help out with that. By accident, of course. It's a mutation that gives us an advantage. There's an activity about that you can do in the first activity day if you want to. Alright? However, this is again another one of my favorites because a designer does not explain this. Why do you make such a crappy grasping tool? Any human engineer could make a better hand. Like seriously. The thing about the hand is that it's defective by nature. Because our hands were not built to be hands originally. Are you with me? Because they came from something that was not for grasping, they will always be limited by that. I'll give you an example. Can you turn your hand completely around?
Well, no.
Not completely around. It stops over here. You can't put it back down in there. And that creates problems sometimes. Right? I'll give you an example of your foot. Right? For walking. Upright. It has some flexibility, but not so much. Sometimes we twist them because they can't go what? Sideways too much. Are you with me? You could design a machine that could roll on completely, and you have like some sort of it's called a wheel, right? So if you're designing something to walk, doesn't a wheel make more sense? Well, not always, because sometimes you have obstacles. Are you with me? So maybe that's why life has not made wheels. But if you want to go fast, wheels will make more sense. Humans made wheels. So you're talking about designing things, right? Or design something that you're allowed to be a wheel when you want it to be a wheel, and when you don't want it to be a wheel, you act like a foot. Humans have made machines like that. It's called tanks. So if you're talking about a designer, the problem is that there's no design. There's no goal. But we are the product of the history of 1,000,000 years. And because of that, that history is in us, limiting us. A best example of that is again the phone. This will never be the best camera. You know why? Because it's designed to be a phone. Are you with me what I'm saying? So because of that, it will always have limitations. Its history limits it, right? So that's why it's kind of like that. Now, this is another one of my favorites. That is perhaps my favorite. Now, my favorite is the next one. Embryology. All right? By the way, there are also analogous structures in the DNA and mosaic structures in the DNA. A lot of genes are actually a combination of many genes put together. Our immune system's genes, for example, are several different genes working together. So it's a way, something that evolved for one purpose being used for another. And that's what mosaic structures are all about. Right? A combination of evolutionary steps and a modification of previous steps to do something new. All right? That's what mosaic structures are all about. Embryology. So, if you show, this is different types of, this is a man, right? At different stages. If you look at that stage right there, and you put a chicken, you put a cow, put a dog, you would need to be a very well-trained embryologist to spot the human. Because in the early stages of the embryonic development, we look just like the chicken embryo, just like the cow embryo, just like the other ones. Because until primate genes activate, our early mammal genes are always that it's on, and we all have the same damn early mammal genes. Are you with me? More important than that is that very, very early on, even in the humans, there are gills. When you're an embryo, on the first few days, you have a tail, and you have gills. Look, see, this is a fish, a salamander, a tortoise, a chicken, a rabbit, and a man. There's the gills on the man. There's a tail. And honestly, if you're not trained, how do you tell these three apart? Even here, who's the human? That's okay. I don't care what you want to believe in. When you look at that, explain that without evolution. Are you with me? Why do we have gills? We have gills because our ancestors had gills. And we lose them because our human genes, our primate genes, ultimately activate and say, don't make that. Actually, unmake that. Because we got something more special for you to make. The lungs. This is crazy, people. Alright? Great evidence. But tails, we lose it. We had a tail all the way down here. We already have arms and feet and we still have a tail back there. Some people are born with it. Seriously. But the ultimate evidence for evolution is DNA. It is uncontrovertible, amazing evidence that we are all one big tree of life. This is biogeography, I already talked about it. Alright? One big tree of life. Now, these are actual examples. I do want to talk about this one, and then I'll introduce the activity, which we'll start today and finish next class. Alright? Listen to me. Shh. When you spray, so if you have a problem with herbs on your garden, and you spray herbicide on it, it was going to kill 99.9% of those herbs. But there's a 1 out of 1,000 that doesn't die because of the herbicide. It's born with a genetic anomaly that makes it resistant to the herbicide. But that means, okay, that's fine. I sprayed the herbicide, 99% of them die. So, or think about bacterial, antibacterial thing. It says here, kills 99.9% of all bacteria. Okay. Kill 1 out of every 10,000 will survive. So that means there's a 0.01% of them did not die. No problem. I'm going to use it again. They'll kill them. Does that work?
No.
Why doesn't it work? Because the ones that didn't die why? They're resistant. So now my hand only has them. And then those are the ones which will what? Reproduce. The next time I use it, it's what? Useless. Now, of course, I use it again and pick up the same bacteria again so I can clean it up again. But my point is, the more of this we use as a society, and we're using it on cows, we're using it on fish, because they live in those crowded places, right? Chicken, the less they become effective, because bacteria, the only ones that survive are the ones which are, this is a big problem and a serious problem. And it's actually evidence of evolution. That happens with viruses, that happens with everything. And there's a bunch of other examples I get into that I already talked about, but examples that show that evolution happens. All right? And that's a thing. So these are the types of evidence that you were supposed to collect for the activity. Now, here's what I want you guys to do. So you have the rest of today, in 15 minutes or whatever, to start on it. We're going to pause on it, and we're going to do the first 30 minutes of next class on it as well. So here's what I want you guys to do. Pay attention. All right? You brought the articles, right? Make sure you have your name on the article that you brought, first of all. If you didn't bring an article, I don't want to hear it. Your excuses. Okay? It's an article. If you have it or have it, it's fine. If you posted the article on that file, if you go to Evolutionary Theory, the main folder on unit files, that file is there, the file that you guys have been typing into. So you can also use a tablet and click on the links and just go that way. So you don't have to fight for an article. So here's what I want you guys all to do right now. Send all pro-evolution articles over here, and now con-evolution articles to the table over here. Alright, so send them that way.
Do we put our name on it?
Make sure, of course, your name is in it. Send all the pro this way and all the cons that way, yes? Separate them and staple them again. Alright? So all the pro articles this way, all the cons that way. Let's go. You have to print them. But if you did not print them, guys, if there aren't enough printed and you're trying to do the activity, just grab a tablet and click on one of the links. Is that clear? Alright, so let's talk about this. Here's what I want you guys to do. There's two stages. Pay attention. You don't need to talk to pass them around. There's two stages of the activity that I want you guys to do. On stage one, guys, all the pros this way, all the cons that way. If we do not have enough paper articles, right, you can work on it next time, or just click on the links online. Now, it's actually 3 stages. 3 stages to the activity. You have to read, okay? You cannot do it on your own because you already read your own, and you can use your own on your writing, but but you're not supposed to obviously read your own. But you have to read 2 additional pros and 2 additional con articles, right? So you're gonna pick up a piece of paper and an article. You're gonna read 2. As you're reading through it, pay attention. I'm going to write this on the board. It's going to be on the board. You're going to take notes on what you're reading, focusing on getting evidence from these articles. I want the hard evidence for their argument. So you are trying to pull from the article evidence to substantiate their point. Are you with me? And you're going to use that evidence later. So you're going to write down, copy down, note down evidence as you read the articles that you can use for later. Is that clear? I want to spend about 15 minutes doing that. This time. Next time around, you're going to write an essay based on con and pro, which I'll give you the instructions for next time. Is that clear? So today, all I want you to do is read 2 additional sources, other than your own, and take notes on the evidence that you can use to write your essays afterwards. Is that clear? That's next class. All right, so make sure you do that. So everybody grab, as you can tell, we do all kinds of different activities. We go outside and run. We do presentations. We do manipulatives. And we also do reading and writing. It's called good teaching. Alright? So then please, right now, take the articles from the pro pile or the con pile. Make sure you put them back in place if they are at the end. Or use the tablets, navigate to the files, and get it done. Let's do it. 15 minutes. I will be collecting your notes at the end of the period. Collecting the notes at the end of the period that you're doing on this. Let's go. Read 2 pros and 2 con articles. Don't get 2 pro right now. Get 1. You're done with it. Get another one. Are you with me? All right, guys. That's it. Yes.
Do we take the notes on our own?